Many people consider Nintendo's golden age to have been the early 2000s, the era of the GameCube, the Wii, and the DS. People get really defensive over this time period. They like to tell you about how Nintendo is pure evil these days, and we should all go back to simpler times. Back when we were happy to get a spooky Luigi game that only lasted 2 hours as a launch title. But what made that such a special time? Nostalgia.
Well, it mostly comes down to Nintendo's rapid and often downright goofy innovation. It seemed like technology was advancing faster than designers and developers could keep up with. It was like an arms race of stupid video game concepts. New things were being tried at every corner, new genres were constantly popping up. Games like Luigi's Mansion delivered great experiences that nobody asked for.
But at the very heart of this innovation was a game so outlandish that not even GameCube-era Nintendo could make it happen. Super Mario 64 2. No, I'm not joking. But you might know it better as Super Mario 128.
We all know about Super Mario 64, the 1996 revolutionary 3D platformer for the Nintendo 64. This game was a huge deal, so in 1997 when Shigeru Miyamoto announced that there would be a sequel released on the 64 disc drive, people let out a resounding
64 what?
This news really hyped up Japanese store shelves, as they were the only ones that owned a 64 disc drive. The 64DD sold terribly in Japan and was never even attempted anywhere else.
If Japan won't buy your weird Nintendo 64 add-on, it's time to cut your losses. But what exactly was Super Mario 128 meant to be?
Well, all we really know is that it was going to utilize the 64DD's maximum potential, and possibly have a multiplayer mode where 2 people could play as Mario and Luigi simultaneously. It's worth noting that the 64DD added some online capabilities, so who knows, maybe those could have been utilized as well. But at some point, they pretty much gave up on making this game multiplayer, not because it wasn't possible, but really just because it wasn't fun. It's tough to make a good cooperative experience out of Super Mario 64 without making some huge changes.
Turns out, running around while somebody else gets all the stars before you can reach them isn't a very good time. But Miyamoto had another idea on his mind, one that was a little more out there. Miyamoto said that he desperately wanted to create a game that had sphere walking, to which his doctor replied, "You should get more sleep."
Jumping from one tiny planet to the next, this was his vision for the next Mario game. But he couldn't wait that long, he needed to make a sphere-walking game now. So, as producer of Doshin the Giant for the 64 disc drive, he tried to convince the developers that Doshin the Giant could be the very first sphere-walking game. But they pretty much said,
"What? No, that's insane, no."
It looked like nobody was up for the challenge.
It's as if some Lovecraftian deity had imparted forbidden sphere-walking knowledge onto Miyamoto's now ravaged mind. Who on this mortal planet could possibly carry out the task of creating the first sphere-walking game?
You may think that this was the end of Super Mario 128, but in August of 2000 at the Nintendo Space World trade show, hope was restored. Nintendo showed a tech demo directed by Yoshiaki Koizumi. It was called Super Mario 128. It depicted 128 independent AI Marios reacting to each other and their environment. They also killed each other a lot and made funny yet irritating noises. And at one part, it showed them walking around on a planet-like sphere.
Miyamoto found the guy that might just make this thing happen.
Just a little while after this demo was shown, Nintendo's new console released, the GameCube. And only a month later came the game that everybody was waiting for, Super Mario 128, or as it was now called, Pikmin. Well, sort of. Pikmin is half of Super Mario 128, the half where there's a bunch of Marios running around. But to many people's disappointment/relief, the game didn't include dozens of homicidal Marios. Instead, this part of the tech demo split off into a separate IP in which Captain Olimar directs little carrot aliens around to do chores and stuff.
While it would have been funny to see a game where you command Marios around, Pikmin has a pretty great world of its own.
It's got such a distinct melancholy atmosphere, and the graphics and gameplay have aged really well.
But let's not forget that this still isn't a Mario game, so it might as well not exist.
While this aspect of the Super Mario 128 project did become Pikmin, there's still no sphere walking. But hope wasn't lost. A new Mario game was on the horizon. In 2002, Super Mario Sunshine released. Still no sphere walking. Then, 2003, Yoshiaki Koizumi, who had directed the 128 demo in 2000, had now begun prototyping spherical platforming, a massive challenge even for Nintendo. It wasn't even clear if all the work ahead of them would amount to anything. The concept had never really been tried before. If the prototypes failed and the eldritch beings who had given Miyamoto the idea were wrong, the whole thing would be scrapped and his suffering would all be for nothing. But alas, it was happening now. The project was finally in motion.
Super Mario 128 stayed in development, disappointing people year after year.
It took so long that the GameCube was now too old, so they kicked it down the road to the Wii, where it finally released, and the burden of Miyamoto's sphere-walking knowledge was lifted at last. Super Mario 128 became one of the most impactful games of its generation, Project Revolution, better known as Super Mario Galaxy. Super Mario Galaxy was such a big project that it was kind of in development before Sunshine was. While most games are tailored to fit their consoles, Super Mario Galaxy played a large role in shaping the Wii. This game is the embodiment of a good idea made into a masterpiece through clever and persistent development. In a way, both Galaxy and Pikmin are Super Mario 64 too.
But what if Nintendo wasn't smart enough to properly prioritize their ambitions?
Well, we just might have gotten Super Pikmin Galaxy.
Had the RTS met with the sphere walking and Super Mario 128 really did release as it once appeared it would, we would have quite the abomination on our hands.
But actually, I thought about it for a bit, and I think it could have worked.
Picture this. Mario somehow gets lost in space and needs to find his way back to his home planet. He stumbles across some familiar little carrot aliens who help him with his travels. They'll make fighting enemies easier, help with platforming, and help him solve puzzles. Mario can collect nectar and use the motion controls to fire it at Pikmin to make them bud, enemies to inflict damage, or use it to solve puzzles. And if you want to play multiplayer, it would work similarly to how the multiplayer from Pikmin Adventure in Nintendo Land worked. The first player is Mario, while the other three are powerful Pikmin who run around and do Pikmin stuff. This actually seems pretty cool. It keeps everything that Super Mario 128 wanted to be all in one game.
But then we wouldn't have gotten Olimar and everything that he brings to the table, like not having eyes and all of that Olimar stuff. Maybe you could swap Olimar for Mario and we'd be good, but the game would probably get a lot more depressing. See, Mario doesn't really have a family or anything. He's like invincible and he just sort of flies around not worrying about anything.
I'm not entirely sure he's human.
But Olimar is just like a regular guy. He is amused by his peculiar surroundings, but I couldn't see him gleefully murdering a Bulborb like Mario would. I think there's a reason that Pikmin isn't a Mario game. The genre, the camera angle, the control scheme, it all makes you feel small and slow and insignificant, so it makes sense to have you play as a little guy like Olimar. But Super Mario Galaxy is open and fast and flashy. Nothing's tying you to any one planet. You're free to explore the universe at your own pace. Whereas Pikmin is all about being constrained. You're only on this planet because you crashed, and you've got to get off of it before time runs out. Each day is a struggle to break even, to just repair one part of your ship without losing all your Pikmin. It's entirely different from Super Mario Galaxy, and it's certainly for the best that these are two separate games.
Well, if you count the multiplayer, it's 3 different games, since it pretty much took Nintendo until Super Mario 3D World to figure out the whole multiplayer 3D platformer thing. Looking back, I'm surprised I had never really heard of Super Mario 128, considering how big of a deal it was. In a way, it was driving a lot of Nintendo's golden age innovation, or at least was a prime example of that innovation.
I've always loved Pikmin and Super Mario Galaxy, so it's been really cool to see how close they came to being the same game.
I hope you guys found this subject as interesting as I did. Anyways, I'll see you later. Thanks.